What happens when the truth you learn on live television turns your entire life into a lie? Stop the tape. Dr. Phil's voice cut through the studio like a blade. The cameras stopped rolling. The audience froze. In his hand, a white envelope that contained answers 42-year-old Michael Roberts had been searching for his entire life. But what was inside would shatter everything he thought he knew. What happened next, no one in that studio, or watching at home, saw coming. 2 weeks earlier, Michael Roberts had walked into the Dr. Phil show offices with a familiar story, a man searching for his biological father. But production assistant Sarah Chin stopped mid-interview and said, "Dr. Phil needs to hear this directly." Michael had been raised by his mother Linda and Robert Roberts in Ohio. Everything seemed normal until his 16th birthday, when a relative made a drunken comment. "It's amazing how much you look like your real father." The comment was dismissed, but the seed had been planted. For 26 years, Michael carried that seed. His mother refused to discuss it. "Robert is your father. End of story." His father would leave the room whenever Michael brought it up. But Michael's wife Sarah saw what the secret was doing to him. He stopped sleeping. Sarah told the pre-interview team. He'd wake up at 3 a.m., staring at old family photos, trying to find himself in his father's face. 3 months before the show, Robert died of a heart attack. At the funeral, Linda pulled Michael aside and whispered, "There's something you should know." But she never finished. 2 weeks later, Linda suffered a massive stroke. The secret was now locked inside a mind that could no longer communicate it. Michael was left with questions that had no answers. The Dr. Phil show's staff investigated. They found Michael's birth certificate. It listed Robert Roberts as father, but the signature looked forged. Hospital records showed Linda had pregnancy complications 7 months before Michael's official due date. Linda and Robert had married unusually quickly, 3 months before Michael was born. Then they found him. David Sullivan, 58 years old, living 3 hours away. A man who had no idea he had a son. The morning of the taping, Dr. Phil called an emergency production meeting. "This isn't about ratings or drama," Dr. Phil told his team. "This is about a man whose entire identity is hanging by a thread. We do this right, or we don't do it at all." He arranged for DNA results before taping, 2 therapists on standby, and a private room ready. "And one more thing," Dr. Phil added. "The second I sense this is too much, we stop. I don't care if we're mid-sentence." The taping began at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon. Michael walked onto that stage looking like a man who hadn't slept in weeks, because he hadn't. His eyes were hollow, his hands shaking slightly as he sat down. Dr. Phil didn't start with the usual pleasantries. He never does when it matters. "Michael, thank you for being here. I know this took courage." Dr. Phil's voice was steady, grounding. "Before we start, I need you to know something. Whatever we discover today, whatever truth comes to light, you are not alone in this room. Do you understand?" Michael nodded, unable to speak. Dr. Phil continued. "You've spent 26 years wondering who your biological father is. You've spent 3 months desperate for answers after your mother's stroke. Tell me, what's the hardest part?" Michael's answer stopped everyone in their tracks. "The hardest part," Michael said, his voice cracking, "isn't not knowing who my father is. The hardest part is feeling like I never really knew who I am." The studio went completely silent. Dr. Phil paused, letting the weight of those words settle over everyone present. This wasn't just about paternity. It was about identity. About truth. About a man's fundamental right to know where he came from. "We did some investigating," Dr. Phil said carefully. "And we found some things. But before I share what we found, I need to ask you, are you ready for the truth, whatever it is?" Michael took a deep breath. "I've been ready for 26 years. Dr. Phil reached into his jacket and pulled out a white envelope. "In this envelope are DNA test results. We tested you against a man named David Sullivan. Your mother knew him 43 years ago, around the time you would have been conceived." The cameras captured Michael's face draining of color. Is he here? He is, Dr. Phil confirmed. He's backstage. And Michael, he had no idea you existed. Your mother never told him she was pregnant. Michael's hands went to his face. The audience could hear his sharp intake of breath. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Dr. Phil moved closer to Michael's chair, his producer instincts momentarily overridden by something deeper. His training as a clinical psychologist, yes, but more than that, his humanity. Michael, before we open this envelope, I want you to understand something. The man who raised you, Robert Roberts, he chose you every single day. Biology might give us genes, but it doesn't give us fathers. Fathers are made in little league games and late-night talks and showing up when it matters. That man was your father in every way that counts. Then why does this hurt so much? Michael whispered. Because truth matters, Dr. Phil said simply. And you deserve to know yours. Dr. Phil held up the envelope. Before I open this, I'm going to bring David Sullivan out here. Because whatever this paper says, you two deserve to meet face to face. Are you ready? Michael nodded. Bring David out. Dr. Phil called to the production staff. From stage left, a man walked out. David Sullivan was tall, graying at the temples, wearing jeans and a button-down shirt. He looked nervous, overwhelmed, and, as he got closer to Michael, visibly emotional. The resemblance was impossible to miss. Same eyes. Same jawline. Same way of standing with slightly hunched shoulders. The audience gasped collectively. Michael stood up slowly, and for a moment the two men just stared at each other across 5 feet of stage floor that might as well have been 42 years. Hi, David said, his voice barely above a whisper. Hi, Michael responded. Dr. Phil let the moment breathe. He didn't rush it. He didn't fill the silence with words. He just stood back and let two strangers recognize each other. After what felt like an eternity but was really only 20 seconds, Dr. Phil stepped forward again. David, you learned about Michael 3 days ago when my producers contacted you. What went through your mind? David's voice shook. I thought it was a scam at first. Then they sent me a photo of Michael, and I saw myself at 40. And I realized Linda never told me. All these years I had a son, and I never knew. Did you and Linda have a relationship? Dr. Phil asked gently. We dated for about 6 months in 1982. It was serious, at least I thought so. Then one day she just ended it. Said she'd met someone else. I was heartbroken, but I respected her choice. I never saw her again. Michael spoke for the first time since David entered. She met my dad, Robert, right after you. It seems that way, Dr. Phil confirmed. He held up the white envelope again. Gentlemen, I have the DNA results. Would you like me to open them? Both men nodded. The studio was so quiet you could hear the envelope tearing. Dr. Phil pulled out the single sheet of paper. He read it silently first, his expression shifting from professional neutrality to something softer, more human. He looked up at both men. David Sullivan, Dr. Phil read carefully. The probability of paternity is 99.97%. Michael's knees buckled. David caught him. Father and son embraced for the first time in 42 years. The audience erupted. But Dr. Phil raised his hand, and silence fell again. Hold on, he said. There was something else. Something in his expression that said the story wasn't over. Stop the tape, Dr. Phil said suddenly. The cameras stopped. The audience stirred, confused. Dr. Phil walked over to his production team at the edge of the stage and spoke in low tones. A producer handed him a folder. When he returned to Michael and David, who were still holding on to each other, Dr. Phil's expression was different. Heavier. Before we started taping today, Dr. Phil said, I visited your mother, Michael. Linda's stroke affected her speech, but not her comprehension. She can't talk, but she can write, slowly, with help. He pulled a handwritten note from the folder. She wrote this morning when I told her we found David and that we were doing DNA testing. She wanted you to have this today, during the show. Dr. Phil handed the note to Michael. Michael's hands shook as he unfolded the paper. The handwriting was shaky, barely legible, but unmistakably his mother's. He read it aloud, his voice breaking. Michael, I was young and scared. David was gone to college. Robert offered to marry me and raise you as his. I thought I was protecting everyone. I'm sorry I robbed you of the truth. I'm sorry I robbed David of you. But I'm not sorry you were born. You are the best thing I ever did. Please forgive me. Mom. Off camera, Dr. Phil made a choice no producer expected. Michael, David, I want you both to come with me. Right now. Dr. Phil gestured to the side stage exit. We're going to take a break. The cameras will stay off. And I'm driving you both to see Linda. The crew looked at each other in shock. This wasn't in the script. This wasn't in the plan. But Dr. Phil was already walking off stage, and Michael and David were following. For 45 minutes the Dr. Phil show cameras sat idle. The audience waited. The production staff whispered. And 3 people, a son, a father, and a mother who could barely speak, sat in a hospital room and cried together. When they returned to the stage, something had shifted. Michael and David walked out holding the same piece of paper, Linda's note, between them. They sat down together, and Dr. Phil resumed his place. Michael, how are you? Dr. Phil asked simply. Michael looked at David, then at Dr. Phil. I'm okay. My mom apologized. David met his son. And I met my father. All 3 of us cried. And somehow, that felt like healing. Dr. Phil nodded. David, what did you say to Linda? I thanked her, David said, wiping his eyes. I thanked her for giving me the greatest gift I never knew I had. And I told her that Michael turned out to be an incredible man, which means she did something right. But what happened next is something no one in the room, or watching at home, saw coming. Dr. Phil reached into his pocket and pulled out 2 cards. Michael, David, these are my personal contact cards. Not the show's number. Mine. Direct line. I want you both to call me in 6 months and tell me how you're doing. Because this isn't the end of your story. This is the beginning. He turned to the audience. I've been doing this for a long time. And I've learned that the truth doesn't destroy families. Secrets do. Michael spent 26 years living in the shadow of a secret. Today, he stepped into the light. Dr. Phil looked directly into the camera. If you're watching this and you're carrying a secret that's eating you alive, whether it's paternity, or trauma, or something you did that you're ashamed of, understand this. The truth will set you free, but first it will make you uncomfortable. That discomfort is worth it. Because living a lie is no way to live at all. Michael stood up and hugged Dr. Phil. Then he turned to David and said, Do you want to meet your grandkids? David's face lit up. I have grandkids? 3. Michael smiled through his tears. And they're going to love you. The audience gave a standing ovation. Dr. Phil stepped back and let the father and son have their moment. Behind the cameras, producers were crying. Hardened crew members who'd seen thousands of shows wiped their eyes. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. After the show, Dr. Phil did something he rarely does. He sat down with the production team and said, This is why we do what we do. Not for ratings. Not for drama. For moments like that. When the truth, as painful as it is, becomes the bridge to healing. 6 months later, Dr. Phil received a letter. It was from Michael, with a photo enclosed. The photo showed Michael, David, and 3 young children at a baseball game. On the back, Michael had written, Thanks for giving me my father. And thanks for reminding me that it's never too late for truth. Michael. Dr. Phil kept that photo in his office. And whenever someone asked him why he kept doing the show after all these years, he'd point to it and say, That's why. The legacy of that episode extended far beyond one family. In the weeks following the broadcast, the Dr. Phil show received over 10,000 emails from viewers. Parents finally told paternity secrets. Fathers and children reconnected after years apart. DNA testing companies reported a 300% increase in requests within 2 weeks. But it wasn't just about DNA. It was about the human need to know where we come from and whether the story we've been told about ourselves is true. 1 year after the episode, Dr. Phil invited Michael and David back to the show. They walked out together as father and son. Michael's 3 children came with them. The youngest, Emma, ran to David and hugged his legs. "That's my Papa David," she announced proudly. Dr. Phil